Do you love a good story? Well, I do. I reckon we all do. And there are different types of stories. Some can make us joyful, some can make us sad, some can inspire us, some can actually be quite harmful. And those kinds of stories are the ones that are the gossip-worthy stories. And are they actually worthy to be shared? Well, that's another story that I am not interested in getting into, apart from the fact that they can be very, very harmful. The stories that I want to talk about are, well, the kinds of stories that we all have on a daily basis. We've all got different stories. Some of them are woeful, some of them are full of drama, some of them that we learn from throughout our time as a human being in this life. I've found that the best kinds of stories are the ones that we can learn something from, so that we can actually become much, much better people. Not just good people, but really great people. I think that underlying everything that goes on in our lives, each and every one of us would truly love to be able to consider ourselves to be great. It's very difficult to feel great, to be great, when all we're feeling is being unworthy. And very often the stories that we remember of ourselves are the very ones that hold us back. Now, if we could just see that all they are stories, just like the stories that we see on the big screen, on TVs, on the TV, in books, etc., there are stories that each of us can take something out of. For some people, there might be, we might hear or see or read the same story, and each of us will take something different from them. Some of us might say, bloody useless. Another person might say, wow, gee, that's worth considering. That's worth really thinking about. Another person might feel very amused and entertained and leave it at that. I'm not saying that either of those are better than the other. Apart from, if I want to improve myself, then I can perhaps look at the story from the point of view of what can I take from this that's going to make me more worthy as a person, the kind of person that I really would love to be able to be associated with. Because after all, that's the most important thing, or that's the most important relationship that I can have, the one that I can have with myself. I've had lots of stories, perhaps not as woeful as some, but I've had my stories. My current story that I have been giving attention to is the kind of story where I have been traveling most of my life. At the age of, I think it was about 19, I left Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, and moved up to Brisbane, to Queensland. I loved it at that time. I stayed there for 2-3 years, and then I returned back to Melbourne. After a couple of years, I moved up to Queensland again. I worked on an island, and I spent 3 months, 4 months, something like that. And then I moved up to Darwin, where I stayed for a year. After that, I went back to Brisbane, back to Melbourne. Since then, at that time I stayed in Melbourne for a few years. Then I moved up to Sydney, where I stayed for 3 years. Back to Melbourne. No, I went up to the Gold Coast, lived in Broadbeach. Back to Melbourne, Adelaide, Melbourne. Country Victoria, East Kimberley's in the top end of Western Australia, to Brisbane, and then more recently back to Melbourne. And I'm sure I've been overseas as well. Now you might be thinking, wow, what an amazing life that you've had. And within those different areas, I've had multiple jobs, lived in multiple addresses, and you say, oh my God, I could never do that. What an adventurous spirit she's got. How courageous she is. Well, it's interesting. I don't find that terribly courageous. It's easy for me. It's easy for me to get up and go, get up and go, get up and go, get up and do something different, yet more different. I personally find someone who stays in one place to be equally courageous. Someone who sets up a family for themselves, a relationship with a person and stays with them for a long period of time, deals with the complexities, the challenges, to be far more courageous in some respects than I am. The thing is, that's a story and that's a story. In both respects, courage can be learned. And the interesting thing is, every time that I moved from one place to another, from one job to another, the very things that I never learned in that previous place, I now had an opportunity to learn in the new place, because whatever you don't learn in one place, you carry with you to the next place. So whether it's about building confidence, whether it's about becoming less of a procrastinator, whether it's about planning, goal setting, whether it's about deepening your relationships, whatever it might happen to be, if you don't make it happen in one place, no matter where you go, no matter how much you change your relationships from one person to the next, you are going to have to deal with, learn from, be able to develop within yourself, the very things that are going to make you be that. Once you have achieved that, then again, whether you stay or move on, you've already learned those skills. You no longer have to be challenged by learning that particular skill that you've lacked in. So the story is kind of irrelevant. It's the underlying issues, problems, questions that we have that are the more important factors to the story. The story just makes it look pretty. You know, you see a movie, and really is all the computer generated images, is the drama really the issue? Or you will see that the thread that connects that story from start to finish is all about maybe love. Maybe it's about the difficult relationships that are going on within that situation. Maybe it's about low self-esteem. If you look at it, even if it's a film about drug and action, you will see that the underlying message within that movie is about, okay, when you have low self-esteem, you will do this, that, and the other. If you lack courage, then this is going to be the challenge that you have to deal with. And then eventually, when that person has developed that courage, that self-worth, then they are able to become the victors over whatever within that movie. So it's quite an interesting thing to really look at the story in the right perspective. Yeah, the story is simply interesting. It's fascinating, it's entertaining, and it's wonderful to be entertained, but not to get caught up in it. Some of us, have some incredibly woeful, sad, depressing stories. And of course we don't want anyone to have those kinds of stories. The thing is, they happen. And if we look at it really from the perspective that it's simply a story and let it pass and we move on, then we have a much better chance of experiencing a much more fulfilling life. So I hope these thoughts have given you an opportunity to think about a little bit about all the stories of your life and the main story that is your life, and perhaps just consider it as simply a story. It's look at it as a book. Each book has multiple chapters, and some of us have got hundreds of chapters, and it makes life just that little bit more interesting and very personal, because whatever happens to you is something that can lead you to the final chapters of your life. And we create those stories. We are the ones who are the authors, the editors, the proofreaders, the creators of our stories. So enjoy your story that's currently being played out and that you have currently played out for yourself. And I look forward to the next chapter and the following chapter, and let's see where it all leads for all of us. So take care, have a wonderful day.